That was just an absolutely dominating victory last night for the Duke Blue Devils. They defeat Miami. Duke has won 16 of their last 18 games and now gets set for a game this weekend at Wake Forest. Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated is our guest on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. Duke basketball with a dominant victory last night over the Miami Hurricanes, and we're excited to break that game down with our good pal Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated on today's show. Duke victorious 84-55, their second largest win ever in program history at Miami. So we got to talk all about that one and get you set for a pretty big game coming up this weekend as Duke goes to Winston-Salem to take on Wake Forest. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Watch our show daily on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Really do appreciate all the support that you've got for us here on Locked On Blue Devils. So without further ado, let's bring him on in. Really excited to be joined today by our pal Conor O'Neill after yet another victory for the Duke basketball team. How are you, Conor?
I'm all right. I'm rested, trying to get a little bit of time, not time off, but like time not scrambling and trying to move a million miles an hour. Cherish those days at this time of year.
No kidding. We're talking last week as the college baseball season's off and running, and here we are. It's heating up in the basketball picture as well for what's set to take place down the back stretch. So we got to talk about that game last night for Duke. In the second segment here, we'll kind of dive into some of the more specific individual numbers that stood out. We'll talk about the Wake Forest game coming up as well, but just kind of big picture takeaways. Duke, the question going in, whether or not Tyrese Proctor would be available. He was available. A question for Miami going in, what is the health status of some of their stars who did not play? I mean, what are some of the big takeaways that you've got from what we saw last night?
Yeah, I mean, not to take anything away from Duke, but I think where you start talking about this game was the fact that we went into it not knowing if either team would have their Tyrese Proctor's kind of a point guard. He's kind of like he plays off the ball when Caleb Foster's in there. Both teams were possibly going to be without their point guards. When you boil it down, like Tyrese Proctor coming off a concussion, missed the last game. Nigel Pack has been dealing with injuries off and on all year, playing through pain. Jim Larinaga told us on Monday morning that while he was on the teleconference with ACC Media, Miami's medical staff was on a teleconference with Nigel and his family to discuss like what the best procedure moving forward would be, which did not sound like it was a type of conversation where, okay, we're just going to rest him for a game and then he'll be fine. And then I don't know who said it. Maybe I think it was in the like 5 to 10 minute out cut in that they did with Shulman and Billis, where Shulman goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, Matthew Cleveland's been sick and he might be out." Or maybe it was a Rothstein tweet from the hour leading up to the game.
Sure.
My wires got crossed there, but it was like Duke got the guy back that they wanted to get back and needed to get back. Miami not only was without the guy that we thought they might not have, they were also without their four, who is a third-year starter in ACC games. Like, you remove two starters from a team, and Duke fans know this, given the Pitt game at home. You take two starters off the team, and they're going to be a different team. So all that to say, you got to talk about the personnel that was out there and kind of how limited Miami was. I mean, they started a guy that I had not heard of, the Paul Joe Bay guy. They're playing guys that have played so minimal this year. And, then you go to what Pack and Cleveland mean to Miami. It's not like they're two breakout players that were just for the first time good. Like, those are two leaders of their team. They're two guys that have been through a lot in their careers. So they looked really limited to me. And then, once you get past all that, it's this Duke team played the most complete game it's played all year, regardless of competition. They looked better last night in a road situation than they looked in any of those November and December home games against the mid-majors. They played great. And to toot my own horn a little bit, I did say going into the game that Duke had taken more threes than twos twice all year, and this will be the third time. And sure enough, 13 of 29 on three-pointers. Most they've made against an ACC team, tied for the most they've made in any game this year. They only took like 26 twos or 25 twos, I think. I was a little worried about it because I thought they were going to stop launching when it got out of hand there late. But, shouts out to Neil Begovic for getting one up, I think. And a couple other guys got in there to get threes instead of long twos. So, complete
performance.
Just a thoroughly dominant performance.
Love to see it from this Duke basketball team. Again, the two guys out for Miami, Nigel Pack and Matthew Cleveland. It's a Miami team that has now lost 5 straight ACC games. Keep in mind, this is also a club that went all the way to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament a season ago. So a much different position than they are in. Cleveland and Pack combine for 28 points per game for the Hurricanes. Duke wins by a 29-point margin. So Duke fans out there, do with that what you will. But to Conor's point, Duke was firing on all cylinders in last night's game, that maybe if those guys are out there, it really doesn't make that big of a difference in terms of what that outcome would have been.
Yeah, you still got to go out and make the shots. Like, this is always just the double-edged sword of playing teams that are shorthanded. It's late in the year and everybody's banged up at this time. It's not like Kyle Filipowski and Mark Mitchell are going out there feeling like they're 100%.
Sure.
Like football, basketball, even baseball coaches will tell you, like, this time of the season, this late, nobody is at 100% feeling wonderful with every part of their body. But when you're dealing with personnel, it gets a little different. And it's a great sign for this Duke team that has sometimes left you feeling like there was a little bit more in their tank. And if there was any more in their tank last night, I don't think I don't know where, like, that was a complete performance. I think that was the performance that people were kind of waiting on to see from this team for a while. And they went out and did it on the road against a team that, like, again, I keep talking in this circle, but it's a team that was shorthanded, but it's also still an ACC team. Like, it's still a team that has beaten some quality teams this year. And Duke went out and beat them by 29 on their home court.
I loved it. I'm one of those people who certainly was a big fan of what we saw last night in that one. A couple of big individual performances that we need to recognize from the game last night from Duke. And let's do that after we take our first break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. That's right, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. We begin to move forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my good friend Conor O'Neill from the Devils Illustrated. We're talking about last night's victory for Duke basketball over Miami. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see our box score here. We'll be sure to point out some big numbers from Duke's win last night. Individually, who stood out from the Blue Devils, Conor?
I think you look at Jeremy Roach first, just because he had one more point than the next scorers. It's just so efficient, and it's what you've come to expect from him this year. 4 of 6 on threes, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. He had 2 turnovers. I don't specifically remember where those came in. I feel like the turnovers really came in a rush in the second half when it was kind of already out of hand and Duke was running away with things. But Billis and Schulman really hit it on the head, and you could tell that it was kind of passed on to them from John Shire. And John in his post-game comments echoed it. Jeremy Roach has had such a solid senior guard season, and it's something that I don't think it's been completely ignored. Like, he has gotten his flowers, maybe not to the extent that you would hope and expect and wish for, but he's been so steady and so solid. And
right.
I pointed it out in the preview. His scoring average is higher on the road than it is in ACC games than it is on the season. I think he's averaging about 15.8 points a game in ACC road games. So it's exactly what you want and what you need out of a player that has experienced the things he has, who is kind of the only player on this roster that has experienced the things that he has to the totality that with which he has gone through them. So that's number one. And then number two, the forwards. Like, if you're going to get a combined 30 points on 10 of 14 shooting and all the other stuff that comes with it, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. I think they had 4 combined blocks, Flip with 3 of them. If you're going to get that from Mark Mitchell and Kyle Filipowski, you're not going to lose too many games. Like, I go back to, it'll be sour for this mention of it, but when Duke played at Carolina, and it's like, Duke did kind of a good job in shutting down RJ Davis and took him away for the most part until the last 8 or 9 minutes of that game. And John Shire was asked about that in the post game, and he just said, well, if Baycott and Ingram are going to go for 46, it doesn't really matter what we do against RJ. I go to we can use this as a little bit of a segue for later, but in Duke's win against Wake Forest 10 or 11 days ago, you say, okay, I'm not sure which guard of Duke's didn't have the greatest game in that one, but that was a Mark Mitchell and Kyle Filipowski combined for 44 points. And you can get away with not getting a ton of points out of your guards in that game.
And Proctor had been scoreless in that one in the 25 minutes before getting hurt.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's just when you're going to get efficient nights out of both of those guys, I don't know what it takes for Duke to lose a game, but it's going to take a lot. Like, it's going to take a really bad performance from the rest of the backcourt to lose a game when those two are going off and playing efficiently the way that they did.
Incredible night shooting the basketball for Duke. To your point a little bit earlier, they tied their season high with 13 makes from the outside. Roach had 4 of them. Caleb Foster had 3 of them. Fresh off a career high of 35 points, Jared McCain only has 7 and 1 make from 3-point range. If you told us that going into the game, we're certainly not as confident that Duke would have been able to do something like that. But I think it's important also for us to recognize, Conor, 2 guys coming off the bench for this Duke team. We could kind of extend that forward conversation to Duke's work on the glass off the bench. In 11 minutes, Sean Stewart has 7 rebounds for the Blue Devils. In 10 minutes, Ryan Young had 9. Like, wow, those guys came in and kind of changed the game.
I did not realize Ryan Young had 9 rebounds in 10 minutes. That is incredible. And 2 assists. And he's the ultimate hustle player. And talk about a player that doesn't get his roses all the time, especially from Duke fans. He takes a lot of criticism, and some of it's warranted. Like, he is who he is. I get the Sean Stewart love. You had Jordan, my podcast host,
man, yes,
Big J, Little J. He brought up Sean Stewart's like rebounds per 40 minutes is just something ridiculous, and we had some fun with that earlier this week. But yeah, those two, if I bring up the if you're getting label with Flip and Mark playing efficiently. If you're getting 16 rebounds off your bench, number one, the other team's probably missing a lot of shots,
right?
Or you're missing a lot of shots.
Can confirm.
Yeah, and that's also going to win you some games.
I love it. Good stuff from those guys coming off the bench. A lot of energy plays that went the long way for Duke. On the glass total, Duke out-rebounded Miami 42-31. Again, Roach led the way with 16 points. Filipowski and Mitchell each had 15 on only 7 shot attempts. Like, to your point, Duke was shooting a lot of shots from three-point range, didn't have to go inside as much. But I think that's kind of helped Kyle Filipowski be a little bit more efficient in some ways, that there aren't as many forced shots as of late as Duke has been on this big run.
His threes yesterday were exactly what you want to see him taking. He must have had 4 or 5 pick and pop threes in the first game against Carolina. He had a bunch of them in the next week against Notre Dame and BC, and they just weren't falling. But like last night, the transition three where I think it was Roach coming up in on the fast break, found him on the wing in front of Miami's bench. And that's a good shot to take. That transition threes, like John Shire's talked about it a few times this year. Those are Duke threes. Those are Duke shots is what he calls them. Those are the shots that you take in rhythm and you make. And like Duke is playing most of the time with 5 players on the court that can shoot threes and that they have confidence in shooting threes. You don't need to see Kyle Filipowski taking 6 or 7 of them every game.
Without a doubt. Big stuff from the Duke basketball team. And now they've got another big test coming up as they go on the road to take on Wake Forest. We'll preview that here in just a little bit after we take this next time out. But just these past 2 games, going to the state of Florida, you're kind of thinking in your head, okay, a trip down there, now you got to fly back to North Carolina, fly back down to Miami. Like, there was an opportunity for Duke to kind of stumble along the way there, Connor. But credit to this team that's got several guys coming back from last year that probably remembers what happened in Coral Gables last season because they really handled that Florida swing quite well.
Yeah, the term, I believe it was Flip. It might have even been Lively too. Last year after they beat Miami in the ACC tournament, they were making the point like, they punked Duke last year in Miami. Like Norchad Omier hit 2 threes in the first 5 minutes, and Miami turned that into a rout. And I think the final score was a 22-point margin, and it felt like it was 30 because it probably was 30 for a lot of that game. So it was, and there was a post-game clip put out by Duke social media last night of Kyle Filipowski getting interviewed by Jared McCain and some kind of weird little potato thing. And I'll have to, I don't know the story on that one. I'm also not a 19-year-old kid, but
a positive potato it was. That's right.
Yeah. We got to get the story on that one. But Filipowski said something to Tyrese about like, we owed these guys one. And I was thinking like, well, you beat them in the last matchup. What do you owe them for? But yeah, I think they were still thinking about the game that they went down there last year and kind of got humbled.
Got walloped. That was quite a performance from Miami in that one. All right, let's take our last break of today's show, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about Wake Forest and what's next for the Duke basketball team right here on Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, we're talking about America's #1 sports book where you can get all of the buckets on your first bet. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to you if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Fresh off the All-Star break, the NBA is back in action tonight on this Thursday. 12 games highlighted tonight, of course, by the Lakers and Warriors. Good stuff that you could check out online. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Blue Devils here today. Once again, Conor O'Neill is here with me from the Devils Illustrated. Promote your work, if you will, Conor, ahead of a big week, because not only do you have the Duke perspective, you also do good work with Wake Forest. Let the Duke fans know a little bit about that and what they can expect.
Yeah, so duke.rivals.com is Devils Illustrated. That's my site. There's a quick breakdown from last night's game. There's some message board posts furthering discussion about it. We've got recruiting intel as it comes and in-depth previews. That's going to be the key one going into the Wake game, because I know both teams intimately. And these are the two teams that I major in throughout the year. So if you want to check out the other site, that's wakeforest.rivals.com. And there's unbiased coverage of them too. So hope you check out the Devils Illustrated account site, but feel free to venture over there onto Deacons Illustrated too.
In some ways, this is fun because it's the same game, same writer that's taking a look at, kind of the perspective for both of these teams going into it. Duke, as we said, has won 16 of their last 18 games. Wake Forest still remains in the top half of the ACC at large. We saw these two teams play in Cameron Indoor, 9 or 10 days ago, and now they're back in action once again. What will tell the story in this one, do you think?
I think the first thing I'm looking at is which five gets in foul trouble first. That in the game in Durham, that was Wake's Efton Reed. He was +6 in that game, but he only played 15 minutes because he picked up 5 fouls. A foul every 3 minutes is a pretty bad recipe when you're your team's defensive anchor. And like I said, they were +6 with him on the court. They were -14 without him. So if he's in foul trouble again, and the double-edged sword of this is the game after Duke, he went to Virginia and played 36 minutes and played great. Was wonderful inside. And then against Pitt, they blow Pitt out by 33 this week. He only played 18 minutes and fouled out. So there's a lot of Jekyll and Hyde to Efton Reed right now, and it has to do with his foul situation. And then on the other side of the coin, we've seen Kyle Filipowski get in foul trouble plenty of times this year. And we've seen that affect him very much negatively from the mental approach, and seen it really torpedo his game sometimes. So I in my perfect world, neither one of them would be in foul trouble, and they'd just be able to go back and forth all game because they're two really talented players. But you also know that they're two guys that like being physical, and they're going to bang around down there, and one or both of them is bound to get affected by a call or two going against them. So that's number one that I would keep an eye on in this game.
So you're down there in the post. Now let's go to the perimeter. Let's talk about the outside. It's a Duke basketball team that just tied their season high in makes from three-point range. Great shooting performance from the Blue Devils against Miami. They shot it pretty well against Wake Forest in the first time around at home. Duke's defense of the three-point line has been pretty impressive here in the month of February, and that goes all the way back to that matchup in Cameron where, Conor? Wake Forest misses their first 11 makes from three-point range in that game. I don't know that will happen once again. I'd be really, really stunned if Wake starts that poorly from the outside. But I do think the three-point line could tell a story in this matchup like it did in the first one.
Yeah, so that's number two. I mean, Wake's, you want to talk about Jekyll and Hyde with Efton Reed, talk about Jekyll and Hyde with Wake's three-point shooting. Their last 6 road games, they're shooting about 24% from behind the arc.
Yikes.
Their last 5 home games in the same stretch, like last 11 games total, the 5 are at home, they've shot 50% on threes.
Holy wow.
It's ridiculous. It's a 26% difference. It's
That's
just
unreal.
They had a game against Louisville where they hit 18 of them, and it's just kind of like, okay, well, that's Louisville. They're down at the bottom of the conference for a reason. And then they
had a game against Duke where they couldn't make anything to start.
They were like 12 for 19 against Syracuse and scored 99 on them. They were, I think it was 10 for 20 the other night, and that was with 2 misses by guys deep into the bench. Like they were over 50% for all intents and purposes against Pitt. So how well these teams play the three-point line. Duke being hot, Wake being hot at home, Duke's defense being really good at running you off the 3-point line. Wake's defense wants to take 3-pointers away from you. Like they've mixed up their ball screen coverages when they, in the last like 3 or 4 weeks, for the first 3 months of the year, we're playing almost all drop coverage, which means basically, hey, we'll give you the 18-footer. We just don't want you to be able to kick it to an open shooter and you get us for 3 points. They've mixed that up a little bit, and Duke saw them mixing it up a little bit. But yeah, I go into this, the first game, Wake was 6 for 26 on threes, and Duke was 7 for 25. So that's 11 for 51. That was a Monday night. Both teams were dead ass tired, I thought, in the first half. I kind of hate the Monday night games because it always feels like it's a little bit worse production. Like it's a worse product.
Right.
It's done for the sake of ESPN and ratings. I think both teams in this one, I think we'll see a lot more makes from three. I don't think I'm going out too far on a limb there to say these teams will combine for more than 11 made threes in this one.
Excited to see it play out on Saturday. Again, there in Winston-Salem. Wake Forest is the home team. Our last question, Conor, in regards to this game, and I'll come back and I'll have more thoughts on the Friday podcast here, previewing this matchup. But from the Wake Forest perspective in this, you talk about motivation for the game at hand. How big is this one? I mean, we're running out of games at this point for teams that want to make the NCAA tournament. We're watching the ESPN broadcast last night. They're putting up percentages of chances that the teams in the league can make it, and Duke's at 100%. The Blue Devils are fine. They'd obviously love to go and win an ACC regular season title, but there's got to be some motivation for Wake Forest knowing how big of an opportunity this is for them to bring Duke back to their place.
It's tricky because with Wake, like that's all the outside noise. That's all the fans want to talk about is they have to win this game to be on the right side of the bubble. If they win this one, then they can talk about winning however many of the next ones to get a seed line that doesn't put them as an underdog in their first game or moves them out of Dayton.
Right.
But this is the one they've got to have. They get Clemson at the end of the year. Maybe Clemson's in the top 30 because it's a home game. They go to Virginia Tech next week, which is still a quad one road game for teams. But again, like this is the one. But Steve has been pretty clear with us that he does not want his team paying attention to all the quad talk. He does not want them dialed into if we don't win this game, then we're going to have to go win 3 games or 4 games in DC and get the automatic bid. Like they very much want to stay focused on getting the number 4 spot in the ACC, getting the double bye and setting themselves up to have a good ACC tournament. And that's in play. Like this week by beating Pitt, they moved ahead of Pitt. They went into the week as a 3-way tie between Wake, Pitt, and NC State. NC State drops a home game to Syracuse, and Wake beats Pitt. So they're 4th place all alone right now, and that's kind of where they're coming at it. Not from the, all eggs are in this basket to win against Duke in home and have that signature win.
Duke.rivals.com. Go check it all out. A good preview coming up for Wake Forest. He's on X at @ConorO'Neal_DI. And this means at this point, I'm going to have you back on next week just for the simple fact alone. Great story time with you last time about after the game is over, you're not following the players to go chat with them, waiting for the coaches to extend. You could have I'm curious how the whole day unfolds for you once again, now that you get a do-over there in Winston.
I'll have to have a better performance this time around.
Best of luck to you, Conor. Excited to chat again soon. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Conor O'Neal joining us here from Devils Illustrated, and that does it for our episode here today of Locked On Blue Devils. Be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get them. We will have Conor on again next week. We got to break down the Duke and Wake Forest game. Hopefully it's a win for the Blue Devils. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.